going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the J Area Podcast. My name, of course, is Jose Ramos Jr. And in professional wrestling today, there's a lot going on. We have the Forbidden Door pay-per-view event coming up this upcoming Sunday, as well as WWE being on fire as of late. So many layers, so many storylines to address, whether it's the Wyatt 6 storyline, whether it's what's going on with the Alpha Academy, Cody Rhodes reigniting his feud with the Bloodline, or perhaps in what I believe to be the hottest storyline in the company for basically 2024, and that is CM Punk and Drew McIntyre, two of the top stars that transcend the idea of what a babyface or a heel would do. These are two individuals who simply do not like one another. I've seen many times over the course of this year how they're able to capture the imagination of fans in terms of their promo style, in terms of their character work. And I don't think there's any doubt in anyone's mind that the payoff to this feud has to be spectacular. It has to live up to the hype that has already been established between two of the top tier talents in the WWE, in the world of pro wrestling in general. You've seen what these two are capable of doing, as not only in the ring, but on the microphone, and the story that they're able to tell. And of course, if you are an avid watcher of the J Area Podcast, which you should be if you're not already sharing, liking, and subscribing to the content that is produced here, but you would know that I've already recapped how the story began, how it's evolved. But I look at pro wrestling, and I think in any instance, you can take a lesson away from it. Obviously, in the previous episode of the J Area Podcast, we talked about family. We talked about searching for that sense of belonging. And as we've seen how the Wyatt 6 story has become unraveled in front of our very eyes, how the Judgment Day story has evolved, there's always a lesson. There's always a theme that can be taken away from, whether or not we'd like to admit it, the better stories in pro wrestling, because for every good story, there's always a really bad story being told. But I look at the sense of the story being told here between Drew and CM Punk, and it's a story that is very universal in the sense that actions have consequences. Of course, that's not relegated to just a story that Punk and McIntyre are telling. It could be attributed to any story. But in this case, actions have consequences. You dial back all the way to the inception of the feud, where Drew McIntyre accused CM Punk of treating him badly, of being a jerk, basically, behind the scenes about a decade ago. That in line with Drew McIntyre's way of thinking of, I'm here to get rid of you, you are going to ruin the company like you ruined another company. And in doing so, CM Punk, who had no quarrel, who had no beef with Drew McIntyre, developed these hard feelings with him, and it would lead him to cost him the World Championship at WrestleMania 40. And obviously, we've been down this rabbit hole. We know how the story has evolved. But where it really picks up is at Clash at the Castle. A couple weeks ago, you would know that Drew McIntyre, on the cusp of winning his second World Heavyweight Championship and his fourth world title in the WWE in general. I say that because apparently some people on the internet wanted to say that the world title and the WWE Championship are all in the same. They're not. They're not the same thing. There are two separate titles, yet they are on the same plane, at the same weight class, if you will. But I digress. The fact is, Drew McIntyre, on the cusp of winning a world championship in his home country of Scotland, was not able to do so because of interference by CM Punk. CM Punk donning a referee's shirt, a referee's uniform, counted to 2 and would not give him that third count, and in essence, the championship. He cost Drew McIntyre an opportunity at that world title in front of his home country. So on the very next episode of Monday Night Raw, Drew McIntyre, in a fit of rage and just disappointment, and he gave up. He said, I'm done with this company, I quit. Of course, we knew that was a ruse because on the episode of Friday Night SmackDown last week, he would appear and attack CM Punk, leaving him a bloody, battered, and beaten mess. And where did he do it? He did it in Chicago, Illinois, the hometown of CM Punk. What Punk did to Drew McIntyre at Clash at the Castle had consequence. You cannot expect to go into a man's hometown, or home country for that matter, cost him the one thing that he has been striving for, the one thing he keeps telling us that he's chasing after. You cannot expect to cost him that and not have him retaliate in some form. Drew McIntyre not only beat down CM Punk, but he took away one of the more important aspects of CM Punk, and that's his humanity. You see, there's this CM Punk that we see on television, the brash, the confident, the cocky CM Punk, who's able to cut a promo on anybody and make it seem like it's a real commentary on that individual. Because you have to remember, there is a line that we must blur between a work and a shoot, between what is real and what is kayfabe. And CM Punk has always been able to do that. He's such an eloquent speaker in terms of telling a story, not only on the mic, but on the mat. And what Drew McIntyre did is he took away this bracelet, this beaded bracelet that had the names of probably the two beings that mean the most to CM Punk. One being his wife, AJ Lee, and the other, their dog, Larry. And even Larry got a little bit of a chant in front of the crowd there. But when you do something like that, now you're asking for retaliation. No matter what happens, no matter who seems to be in the right or in the wrong, so long as they keep on topping one another with their actions, with their attacks, with their insults, these two, I think, are destined to fight forever. They've now established that they do not like each other. In the past regime, WWE would have these two feud and maybe down the line have them team up. We've seen that with Seth Rollins and Cody Rhodes. But what I like what they did with those two is they had a feud 2 years ago when Cody Rhodes first jumped over to the WWE. He would beat Seth Rollins 3 times in a row and get injured with his pectoral. And when they teamed up against the Bloodline, there was that level of reluctancy. There was that hesitancy that can Seth Rollins be trusted because of the whole Shield situation, because of their past. But in this current regime, I cannot see Triple H and company tell a future story where these two team up. The only way they can do that is if it's one of those, can they coexist? But the way it's being told right now, CM Punk has expressed that as long as he has breath in his body, as long as he is physically able, he will ensure that Drew McIntyre will not win a world championship, that Drew McIntyre will not get what he wants. And in doing so, he now paints a target on his own back, because you know for a fact Drew McIntyre will be looking to do the same. Drew McIntyre said that he would protect this company from CM Punk, and in that very first match at the Royal Rumble, kayfabe or shoot, whether we like it or not, he got CM Punk injured. And that was the goal. That was the idea. I remember the promo right after he said, I prayed for this. And what was a fantastic promo, fantastic delivery by Drew McIntyre, because you can sense it. You can believe it. And that's when pro wrestling is at its best. When you can believe it. When you suspend your disbelief and you just let it happen. And you just ride it. You just join on for the ride. Between CM Punk and Drew McIntyre, I think we can anticipate that Punk will take some time off. Given the angle that they gave him when he was taken off of a stretcher into an ambulance, into a hospital, I think it's safe to say we won't be seeing CM Punk for quite some time. But there is this speculation that Drew McIntyre could win his triple threat match on this episode of Monday Night Raw coming up, qualify for the Money in the Bank, and CM Punk makes an appearance costing Drew McIntyre the contract, thus setting in motion for the match, the highly anticipated match at SummerSlam. Some people are saying it should main event. I personally, I wouldn't be against it. I think whatever your hottest feud is, I think whatever your best match is in terms of story, that should be your main event. You can make the argument for the World Championship between Gunther and Damian Priest. We don't know what Cody Rhodes is going to be doing. Some people are saying it could be a match against Solo Sikoa. But if you put these three up against one another, I don't know how you cannot have Punk McIntyre main event SummerSlam. And if it doesn't main event SummerSlam, surely it would have to main event one of their B pay-per-views, like the rumored Bad Blood pay-per-view, or PLE, whatever you want to call it, coming after that. Just a thought. But this idea that actions have consequences is not entirely new. We saw with Solo Sikoa and the Bloodline That's what this whole thing is based on. He says that losing has consequences, but it's universal. Whatever Solo Sikoa deems fit for this current iteration of the bloodline, it will come back to haunt him, just like it did for Roman. When Roman Reigns ran the bloodline the way he did, and he had all this type of interference in his matches at WrestleMania 40, it all came to a head when you saw John Cena came out, when you saw The Undertaker, when you saw Jey Uso, and Cody Rhodes ultimately got that win and finished the story. It was a culmination of all of that. Solo Sikoa will have to answer for the way he's handling the bloodline, for the way he's treating and threatening Paul Heyman, because I think we all know when Roman comes, it's going to be that revelation that Roman Reigns was not giving orders, that Solo Sikoa was acting out on his own accord, and he will have to answer to the tribal chief, the rightful tribal chief. And although they were ready to crown Solo Sikoa as the heir to the tribal throne, Roman Reigns is not ready to give that up. Now, and this time, of recording, we would know that Roman Reigns sadly would lose his father. He would pass away this past week. And I think we all should be in agreement that Roman Reigns should take as much time as he should, as much time as he needs to grieve. One half of one of the best tag teams, the Wild Samoans. It's a shame. It is a shame. And I've always believed that Roman Reigns did take extended amounts of time away from the WWE, especially during his 4-year title reign. But given that has now concluded, that chapter has now ended, I think he's earned the right to take this time away. This is now the time where you take a step back and you allow the fans to miss him. You allow them to want to see him. And that's what we've been seeing with these chants of "We want Roman." So when Roman finally does come, I hope it's unannounced, because it's going to be a great pop. It's going to be a huge pop. And who's to say it doesn't happen later today on Friday Night SmackDown? They are doing one of those bloodline segments where it's like an acknowledgement ceremony. Where's SmackDown emanating? Madison Square Garden, the biggest arena. I mean, not physically, but in terms of name value, the biggest arena in sports entertainment. So, will it happen? I don't think so. I don't think it's going to happen. But will we get closer to that return? We'll have to wait and see. But actions always have consequences. And I think that is the basis of what the storytelling has had. Look at Chad Gable. Chad Gable, after mistreating, whether it was verbally or emotionally, treating his members, his students in the Alpha Academy, now pays for it. They now leave him. And who's to say that the Wyatt Six attack on Chad Gable isn't in relation to that? They all are misfits of families that abandoned them, and yet here they see someone who has a family and he's mistreating them. And he's not very nice to them, to put it simply. You take advantage of them. Perhaps that's why Chad Gable is a target. Chad Gable needs to learn to be grateful for what he has. But the interesting thing is, at the conclusion of this segment on Monday Night Raw, you see Chad Gable go up to the locker room. He's talking to Maxine, Tozawa, and Otis. And at the conclusion of that, they close the door on him. And who does he encounter? The Creed brothers and Ivy Nile. And it's been rumored that that might be the new iteration of the Alpha Academy, where they can now challenge Otis, Tozawa, and Maxine. I think it's interesting. I think it'll be a great way to put over the Creed brothers and have them elevated up the card rather than just having matches on main event, because we haven't seen them in quite some time. And if we do, it's in these inconsequential matches that don't really mean anything. I think it'd be a great way to kind of develop their character and get them more familiar with the audience, and vice versa, have the audience familiar with them. But then when we jump over to the other side, All Elite Wrestling, as I mentioned, will be holding its Forbidden Door pay-per-view event this upcoming Sunday. And one of the big storylines coming into the pay-per-view is the story of Will Ospreay, the international champion, taking on Swerve Strickland, the AEW World Champion. And this is the pay-per-view event before All In that takes place in Wembley, at Wembley Stadium, I should say, in the United Kingdom, London, that is, and Will Ospreay, hometown hero. Will they pull the trigger and crown Will Ospreay as that champion? I don't think so. I don't think they will be doing that. Why? Because of what happened on this past episode of AEW Dynamite. You start the show with MJF, who I think by far is the best that AEW has to offer. Not only in ring, but just his character. Every time I see he's advertised, it's must see. I have to keep up to date what Maxwell Jacob Friedman is doing. He's interrupted by Danny Garcia, and Danny Garcia, again, climbing the card slowly but surely. I'm looking forward to what they're able to do with him moving forward. But he offers him a match at All In. What about MJF versus Danny Garcia? And that has a lot of potential in it already, especially with the way they've been portraying MJF. He's riding that line between heel and babyface, very much a tweener, if you will. I think he still has those heelish qualities, but we can't help but cheer him just because of how entertaining he is. But in the middle of that offer of the match at All In, we are interrupted by the international champion, Will Ospreay, who just waltzes into the ring and praises Danny Garcia and tells him, when I win the world title, I'll give you a title match next week on Dynamite. But not only for the international championship, but for the world title winner take all. Already assuming he's going to defeat Swerve Strickland. And in the corner, you can see MJF just brushing it off, almost seething that he was interrupted by Will Ospreay. Who are you to interrupt me? And just walk right past and ignore that I literally just wanted a match with him being Danny Garcia. I think that's where it gets interesting. Swerve Strickland has already felt disrespected in this instance because he's saying in a segment afterward, you're already giving out title matches and you haven't even beaten me yet. Which is making a chip on the shoulder of Swerve Strickland just a little bit bigger. But now Will Ospreay has managed to make two enemies in one. Swerve Strickland now has a bigger chip on his shoulder. As I mentioned, he's going to want to defeat Will Ospreay decisively. However, the second enemy in this equation, if you will, is MJF, who is not shy about his heelish tendencies. I think MJF somehow or some way is going to interfere in this world title match. He will cost Will Ospreay the match itself, and I think we're going to lead to a match at All In. I do think we get on the road to All In, we get this Danny Garcia versus Will Ospreay, Danny Garcia versus MJF, but I think All In is where we're going to have Will Ospreay versus MJF. That's just my feeling. Obviously, I'm not the booker. Obviously, I'm not Tony Khan, but that's just the sense that I got coming out of that segment. And I look at the way Swerve Strickland's been portrayed, and I feel like there's still much more you can get out of Swerve Strickland as the world champion. You could still have many more matches, high quality stories. I still think there's something to be told with Hangman Adam Page as well, who hasn't returned yet. But seeing that these two had a great feud last year, and now elevating it with the world championship itself, I think that has an opportunity to elevate that as well. But regardless, that is something to look forward to. I think it'll be one of the more high-profile stories of the summer, and I'm curious to see how the card for All In builds up and what will be the main stories. Obviously, we know that Swerve Strickland is going to defend that title. As of right now, we don't know because he hasn't beaten Will Ospreay at Forbidden Door just yet, but that's my prediction. How else is the card going to figure itself out? I'll go ahead and release my predictions for the Forbidden Door card in a later video, so keep an eye for that if you want to keep up to date with what my thought process is regarding the booking of All Elite Wrestling and the Forbidden Door story and Forbidden Door pay-per-view in itself. But it's actions like that. You can't be Will Ospreay and just interject yourself into a segment that you weren't even intended to be a part of and not expect consequence. I think that's what we're going to end up seeing. I think MJF, out of envy, out of spite, and just out of disrespect, is going to interfere and cost Will Ospreay the matchup. Will it turn MJF back into a heel? I don't know. I think both of those guys ride the fine line between heel and babyface. But I think in this story, Will Ospreay will probably be the babyface. MJF will be a heel just because he's better as a heel. Don't get me wrong, he's been great in the role that he's been in the last few months, rather the last year and a half, really. But he's just a much more natural heel, in my opinion. But go ahead and sound off in the comments below. What did you guys think about the build up to AEW Forbidden Door? What is your hype like levels for the Drew McIntyre and CM Punk storyline? Do you think it'll be the main event of SummerSlam? Don't forget to make sure to like, share, and subscribe to follow all the J Area podcast episodes, as well as keeping up to date with the content that is produced on this channel. And with that being said, guys, my name is Jose Ramos Jr., and I'll be seeing you guys in the next video.